Hi, and welcome to the 75th edition of the REBT Advocates with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein of 3minutetherapy.com. Me, Tommy Bateman, counselor extraordinaire in Richmond. You can find Michael in San Francisco or online. Go to his website. You'll find him. It's all right there. Email us your questions and comments at rebtadvocates@gmail.com. Today, we have a special guest. He is the author of AA, Who It Helps, Who It Harms, Who It Kills, and Why. Dr. Edward Wilson of Calabasas, California, working for Your Empowing Solutions Incorporated. He is one of the co-founders, if I'm correct. So we wanted to talk about this book. Let's just get into it. I'm going to leave his website. It's non12step.com. I'm going to put it down here. You'll see it. I guarantee it. I promise this time. So Ed, welcome. Thank you for coming on this time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, especially the opportunity to sort of meet Dr. Edelstein, whose book we have been giving out to clients for the last 15 years. So we're one of your better marketing people.
Wonderful.
The book was, or guide, it's a little thin to be called a book at 70 pages, but the guide is kind of the distillation of 30 years of research, the last 15 of which Dr. Barnes and I have done together at Your Empowing Solutions. And I've always been interested in those people whom AA harms and kills.
Excellent. Michael.
So I had the opportunity to do a lot of research about how to do that, but I would rather entertain questions specifically than pontificate at length.
All right. Okay, well, I just want to say, Dr. Wilson, I enjoyed your book very much. I thought it was interesting, informative, and highly recommended to our audience. And there are a number of new concepts in there that I was not familiar with. One was pseudo egalitarianism. Would you tell us what it consists of and what it means?
Yes, pseudo egalitarianism is the false belief that things are equal, which aren't. So a colleague of mine at St. Mary's when I was a graduate student used it to apply to programs for the gifted or special ed or whatever, which kind of pushed the notion if we do everything right, we can make everybody normal. And it's simply not true. In AA, it's an alcoholic's an alcoholic, and the only thing that works is AA, and everything's the same. Well, no, it's not. People differ wildly and widely in their experience, their skills, their other traits. People are not the same emotionally and psychologically any more than they're the same athletically or artistically.
Absolutely. Now,
very good.
Go ahead, Michael.
Just as a follow-up, Tommy, I agree people are not the same, but as a REBT therapist, what I find is some of the differences are some catch on more quickly than others. Some could progress, some do progress much further than others. Some have more of an interest in applying it to broad areas of their life than others. But in terms of their learning the basics and making large changes in their life, I think that pretty much to a point, they're all pretty much the same in terms of that objective. And do you find that in helping people with addiction problems?
Well, in our work, we instill or teach or guide or whatever people through a number of new to them usually coping mechanisms, which include CBT and assertiveness training and other sorts of things, motivational enhancement, all of those sorts of things. And yes, we refer to it as CBT or EBT is fine, but people grasp it more quickly than others, or people are not interested or they don't want to put in the effort to internalize it. We teach that this is a skill you internalize. It's not something you sit down and do with your therapist once a week for the next 20 years.
Very good. Very good. Tommy?
Yeah, we were on the same page about that. The only way to get better is to practice, 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 right? So, one of the things I noticed is Dr. Jane Levenger. Am I saying that correct?
Yes, Jane Levenger. Yes.
Levenger. So it was you kind of have a developmental model in there. Can you just briefly explain that developmental model? I find it really interesting, especially compared to my work with inmates that abuse drugs and alcohol.
Okay. I used to do inmates that abuse drugs and alcohol as well. Jane Levenger grew up in Minnesota, did her bachelor's there, did her master's work under Erik Erikson at Stanford.
That's why.
Went on to a 50-year career at Washington University in St. Louis, beginning about 1950 to 2000.
Mm-hmm.
She died a few years later at about 94, 95.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to develop a way to measure what she referred to as ego development, which is essentially emotional and psychological maturity in women.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, that got extended to men and adolescents, and then the form got all kind of standardized back to a single form for men and women, where you have 36 sentence stems to be completed.
Mm-hmm.
And then those are rated. There's a guidebook for doing that. Having done some 6,000 of them over the years, the guidebook isn't real necessary. But you're looking at people's way of thinking, looking for complexity, humor, uniqueness, originality, or whether what they're putting down is just the standard, usual, predictable responses.
So how does this apply to AA? How do Levenger's developmental stages translate to a harmful response in AA or killing?
Okay,
them?
let's start with where it works.
Uh-huh.
AA demands conformity, non-thinking conformity. So it works for people whose developmental age, shall we say, is arrested at or around puberty or earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and whose peer group is everything. They adhere to the peer group, they adhere to the rules. It also works for the people whose maturation was arrested at 2 or 3 or 4 years old, which is the predators.
Mm-hmm.
Predators own the treatment centers, the conformists work.
It sounds, I'm gonna throw this out here. It's no wonder that AA became popular among the baby boomer generation. Throwing it out there, leave me alone. No, we're not going to go there too far. But go on, Michael. You have to say.
Yeah, I find in doing REBT, it's hard for me to pigeonhole personality types that it works with. I've had great success with scientists, and at the other end, I've had great success with spiritual types, artists, creative people, things like that. So is there research backing up what you just said, Ed, about who AA helps?
Well, frankly, the research is mostly the research I have done, both as a graduate student at St. Mary's University in Minnesota, and then the experience that Dr. Barnes and I have had translating that into our particular program, which is, 500 of the people who fall into the harm and kill category. People who are appropriate to AA don't come to see us, and we wouldn't take them if they did. Obviously, if AA is going to work for you, you don't need to pay for it. You just go do it.
I see. Now, as you know, rational motive behavior therapy has a theory about what causes addiction. The immediate cause is people who have strong preferences to drink for whatever reason. They have a craving, or they want to medicate stress, or they want to fit in with their friends. So those are all influences. But when they escalate these preferences into demands, musts and shoulds, I absolutely must satisfy my urge and craving because I prefer to. I must not be disapproved of by everyone else in the party who's drinking, etc. That's the immediate fundamental cause of addictive behavior. Does your model see it that way also?
Our model sees CBT as, or REBT as a way of minimizing that kind of distress. We stress that self-medication, which we prefer to abuse or addiction or alcoholism or any of those, we see self-medication as symptomatic of loneliness, boredom, trauma, anxiety, depression, all things which respond fairly well to REBT. We also see it as symptomatic of unbalanced lives and relationships, which frequently respond well to assertiveness training. So we only work with individuals and occasionally couples because everybody's mosaic of what they are medicating differs from everybody else's. And therefore, the mosaic of how to address what's being medicated varies from individual to individual.
Right. But what I see is the reason people medicate is because they think they must escape this relationship, or they must not be fired, or they must do better in their relationships, and therefore they drink to escape that. I must drink in order to escape these other problems. So you can help people overcome their addictions without necessarily helping them with these other problems. Is that correct?
Well, we're saying that our use of your work, which is always what we start with on the second day, is to make them get rid of the shoulds and the musts, but also to teach them how to process events and their reactions in ways in which they learn that their emotions are things they create. They don't just spring up like mushrooms. You know, it's your thoughts and behaviors that create your emotions, not the other way around. So that's certainly a critical component. We do have people who discover, oh, well, geez, I've been using this my whole life. I just didn't know it had a name. Then other people for whom it's a completely foreign concept. So again, that's where, okay, so this is something to learn. And then some people do and some people don't. And some people say, yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with that reaction.
Yeah, that's among the inmate population that I would teach these concepts to, that, you know, emotions aren't something that just happened to you because somebody else did something. It's because your thought about what happened caused it. Some have like a light bulb moment. Many of them did, and we're like, oh wow, so I've been using these drugs to be my emotional regulation in order, like if I wanted to be happy, boom, I'm going to take some cocaine. If I wanted to calm down or de-stress, boom, I'm going to push that button called opiates. Then they realized they had that control over their own thoughts. That desire lessened, from what I understand.
Yeah, we're frequently operating at kind of the other end of the spectrum from when I was working at like Stillwater in Minnesota and places like that. We're working with doctors who are ERs and surgeons who are using alcohol to come down in the evening and then cocaine to come back up again in the morning. Because they don't know how to say no. Or we're working with both men and women who have exceedingly controlling spouses. And alcohol is the one thing the spouse can't control, or it forms an invisible protective bubble around their existence with this person because they aren't assertive enough to say, out of here. No. So then the REBT comes in helpful with helping people overcome their irrational fears of change.
Excellent. So I wanted to go next into, because we're limited time, of course. Who does AA harm and kill?
AA harms people. Let's kind of do an example. Someone reaches a crisis point in their life and they don't know what else to do or anything else as far as they know, so they trundle off to AA. And their association there causes them to sober up. And when they sober up, they become less depressed because they're not consuming vast quantities of a depressant. But they also tend to grow up some back to their normal state because alcohol's also a regressant. So you stop drinking, you get less depressed, you get less regressed, and you literally outgrow AA, but by that time you may be so brainwashed that you're afraid to just leave. Now you take the people it kills, those are the very bright, creative, idiosyncratic people, and AA says you have to give all that up. You have to conform, you have to give up it's your best thinking got you here. No, it's not. So there's all this mythology that you have to be. John Berryman, the poet's a really good example. 3 tours through Minnesota model treatment in Minnesota there when he was at the U, and then it was off the bridge and onto the Mississippi. Suicide is a frequent cause when the gifted, brilliant, talented, whatever, are told they have to give all that up. And AA says that. You give it up.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah. When people commit suicide or what you say AA kills, I have a different view, and that is AA can only influence people with their bad theories. But then the thing that causes someone to jump off the bridge is normally what they believe and what they're telling themselves, and it may incorporate what AA tells them, the misinformation that they get, or it may not. So does that make sense, that to say that AA kills sort of says that situations like AA do it to you, make you do things, whereas I like to put the responsibility squarely on the shoulders of the doer.
Okay, but if you isolate people and brainwash them, then you are kind of responsible for some of the outcomes. Charlie Manson doesn't get off the hook because he isolated a bunch of very bright, highly sexual young women and brainwashed them into committing murder. Or Jim Jones doesn't get off the hook for getting a bunch of people to poison themselves and their children. AA brainwashes people and isolates people, and people end up thinking there's no way out.
How does AA isolate people?
Well, because you're not supposed to be associated with normal people. You have to stay within the cult.
Change your people, places, and things.
Yes.
Actually, it was my understanding, not from the few AA meetings I went to, but from my clients who have been to AA, that it's the opposite, that you're not supposed to have relationships, especially intimate relationships, with other people in the AA group. So you go outside to have those relationships.
No, you're not supposed to go outside either. You're supposed to stay within the group, where you then get exploited by the 13th steppers who,
now,
like Bill W., the founder, are specifically there to exploit vulnerable newcomers.
Is that one of the 12 steps, or is that written in the big book or something?
No, that's referred to as, throughout AA, as 13th stepping, is particularly sexually, but any more exploiting vulnerable newcomers. That's why predators make up a huge percentage of regular AA attenders and treatment facility owners.
So the 13th step is do not associate with anyone outside the AA.
No, the 13th step is exploiting newcomers sexually, financially, emotionally.
It's unofficial, but it's there.
Yes.
So in fact, actually, Michael, you mentioned that like AA people and Al-Anon people are not supposed to have too much, of course, deeper relationships or deep sexual relationships with other members. But that happens. It's just what happens all the time. So they break that law.
Yeah, because you're supposed to stay away from normies too.
Yeah.
That's another big deal. You must stay away from normal people.
Yeah. which
Yeah.
might include your family and your friends that you had
Mhm.
before, your natural support system. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Perhaps different AA meetings work somewhat differently.
Well, there are of course, differences. AA is not monolithic, um, but you don't know that when you wander in. You don't know you don't know whether you're wandering into a snake pit or whether you're wandering into a support group.
Yeah. Tommy?
So one of the most, when it talks about who it kills, one of the most, I think, damaging myths that AA has, and it violates the first major must of REBT, is kind of the once the alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic, that label that you are something. Now, many of the people that I dealt with, especially that abused opiates, and of course they do NA, which is the same principle,
Mhm.
except with narcotics. They would think, okay, I relapsed. They've been clean for months and they relapsed, and they go, oh, that's right. I'm a user. This is what users do. They use. I'm a loser, so I might as well just keep on losing. That's what we do. I'm an alcoholic. What we do is drink. So why don't I just keep on drinking because there's no hope for me? This is what I am. This is what I was born. This is the allergy I have, which is just plain false. What was your comment on that?
Well, basically, when we're dealing with clients, we say, it's kind of, first of all, quit counting days.
Yeah.
There's no point in that. Secondly, think of it similarly to weight loss. You decide to go on a diet in July to get a little thinner by the holidays or whatever, and December comes around and you've lost 20 pounds, and then there's the holidays and you gain a couple of pounds. You're still 18 pounds to the good. You aren't back to square one.
Yep.
You know how you lost the weight. You get up on, you go ahead and lose it and keep on going. It's
Exactly.
cumulative.
Right. And also when you lose weight, they don't say you're a fat, skinny person.
No.
Yeah.
So when you haven't had alcohol,
No.
after having a problem, you're not a dry drunk. You're someone who's not addicted to alcohol.
We stress that labeling yourself is destructive and to stay away from it.
Very
And
good.
we stress
Me too.
that the way you become an alcoholic is to join AA. And we stress that being a long-term sober AA member is the definition of a dry drunk, because you are simply doing the same behaviors for the same reasons with the same people as you've always been isolated with.
But if someone is addicted to AA and they're addicted to alcohol, I still don't think that warrants saying they're an alcoholic or they're an addict.
No,
Rather, they're an imperfect human who
we're simply
has
saying that if you want an excuse, then AA is as good as an excuse as vodka is. I mean, AA is just a place to hide, like a bottle's a place to hide.
Yeah. Tommy?
I know we need to wrap it up soon, but I did want to make a point. You talked about those 13 steppers. You know who were my best AA participants? Because AA was in the jails I worked in. Jails, actually 2 jails I worked in. The best AA folks were this type of inmate, the sex offenders. They were really good at it. They were really good at it. So.
Well, because they were getting a payoff.
Oh, they were getting some, yeah, definitely.
I mean, when I worked at the men's pen and the women's penitentiary in Minnesota, the sex workers of one sort or another got the most benefit out of AA because they got the most business.
Yep, it's true.
Yeah.
They got their alternative preferences met. And that, just as an aside, those programs that I worked in were Synanon-based programs. That's a really punitive, nasty cult that makes AA look harmless.
Yeah.
I've had clients who come to me, they like some things about REBT, and they go to AA, they like some things about REBT, about AA rather, and that seems to help them. I have other clients who don't want to have anything to do with AA after going to a few meetings. And then I have a third group of clients who don't like AA at all, but since there's a meeting every day around here or two, they find it useful just to go and remind themselves of the problems they will have if they continue drinking. So do you find that kind of breakdown?
Well, because we don't really we screen clients. Our website screens clients both ways. It screens the people who are appropriate for our work in and the people who are appropriate, not appropriate out. That includes AA. We do some, smart recovery as a short-term, up to a year support alternative. And since it's REBT based, that satisfies the people who want a support group of one sort or another.
But by the way, I consider SMART as differentiated from AA. AA is sort of a support group of a kind, where Smart Recovery is really a self-help group because we teach people to be independent of SMART and to learn how to help themselves. So it's more of a self-help than a SMART.
But that should be the outcome of AA as well. When you're trapping people into a cult and telling them they can never leave, then that's damned harmful.
Yeah.
Okay, Tommy, did you want to have a last question?
No, last comment. AA is the mix of bad science and bad theology. I'm a religious person. There's nothing Christian about it. So that's it.
No.
Yeah.
And Ed, is there anything in summary you'd like our viewers to know about your book or anything?
Basically, Dr. Barnes and I operate our very modest in terms of numbers program based on self-medication's a symptom. It's not a disease. You're not powerless, and you don't have to do anything for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Ed, do you have a website?
Yes, the website is, not too shockingly, www.non12step.com. And the 12 is the number, not the word.
Very good. And I'd like to recommend to everyone again to get Ed's book, Dr. Ed Wilson, AA, Who It Helps, Who It Harms, Who It Kills, and Why. There are some very interesting and helpful concepts in there.
And the book is available as an ebook, from Amazon, from Barnes & Noble and other ebook sites. It's available as the paperback that you two have received from our website.
Very good. Very good. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Wilson. It was very interesting discussion. And if you enjoyed this video, please comment below, give us a like, and subscribe to the REBT Advocates to stay on the rational side of life.